What do we make of the tag? It's always been a part of the AFL, and despite its popularity diminishing over time in favour of backing in the team system, the matchup between Marcus Windhager and Nick Daicos was one of the highlights out of round 15. Daicos ended up with 30 disposals and an important goal to take the points, but it was an enthralling and physical battle. Collingwood teammates helped out Daicos, who himself stood up, and Windhager was as diligent as you can ask. But does it work in terms of winning? Sure, you can take an opponent out. Windhager the previous round held Western Bulldog captain Marcus Bonampelli to just 14 disposals, yet St Kilda lost by 72 points. However, early in the year, Toby Bedford did a great job on Daicos, which helped the Giants win in opening round. So through crunching some numbers and looking back at the most used taggers in 2025, we can finally get a clearer picture on how effective the defensive tactic is on helping a team get the 4 points. Now for this exercise, I've gone back and looked at every game up until the conclusion of round 15 to see if a tag has been used and compared that with the end result of the game. Now I have not included games where both sides have used a tag, a defensive forward has been used, or games where a run with roll has been used after half time to try and get this win percentage as accurate as possible. The teams mainly that use tags are Sydney with James Jordan, GWS with Toby Bedford, and St Kilda with Marcus Windhager. Now Brisbane have used Josh Dunkley as a man-on-man player at times, Tom Atkins has done a similar role with Geelong, and Jack Viney has also had a couple games where he is tagged. From the 15 rounds, I found 23 games where one side used the tag and the other didn't, most of them featuring GWS, Sydney and St Kilda. The overall result had the tagging team win 11 games and the non-tagging team win 12 games for an overall win percentage of 48% for the team that decided to tag. Now I'm not saying this list is perfect and it doesn't include tags deployed during games, so do take this with a grain of salt. But it is a pretty good sample size to work with. It shows the tag is near a 50-50 proposition to help a team win, and watching most games this year, that percentage feels just about right. However, it is interesting looking at the ladder that most of the top teams do not start games with taggers. Again, Geelong and Brisbane do have some players who can go one-on-one, but when this does happen, it normally develops as the match goes on and an opposition player begins to get hot. Sydney, Melbourne and St Kilda, who have at least semi-regularly used a run-with player, sit in the bottom 10, and the GWS Giants, who sit 7th, are really the only top 8 club that use a tagger week to week. Now you can absolutely shut out an opponent, but the tag as time has moved on has been manipulated heavily and can turn out to be a disadvantage. Here is some great footage from First Crack presented by David King that shows how clever midfields are getting at creating space from the tag. From Daicos moving to a sweeper role at centre bounce and simply shifting Windhager's position, it creates such a large amount of space for others to run into and therefore benefit from. Bonampelli did the same a week before, often placing his big frame in say Ed Richards' opponent or Tom Liberatore's, which creates a 2-on-1, and the same concept of space creation applies. The pick play, like from basketball, can also be just as effective and actually move the tagger off the man they are supposed to cover and create confusion between opposition teammates. Because the tagger is often so concentrated on one man, it can leave gaps for others. Now pure inside mids, for example Matt Rao, can be easier to stop. Josh Dunkley in the Q Clash did a fantastic job on him, but the bigger mids like Bonampelli, Jordan Dawson and Will Day can also push forward and again create that matchup confusion. Then like we saw Daicos against Windhager and Dawson against Dunkley in that game's final quarter, the opponent might just be too good for the tag and then render it ineffective. It also leaves the team that uses a pure tagger essentially an offensive player short, and that can lead to struggles in specific systems and in ball movement. But the stats do show it is effective nearly half the time, so it must have some benefits. Well, the obvious one is it can totally shut out match-winning players, especially around clearance. For Melbourne's first win of the year, Jack Viney went to Caleb Sarong and held him to just 5 clearances while getting 25 disposals himself and kicking a goal. The before mentioned example of Dunkley on Rao was another key matchup win. Rao had 1 clearance for the game, and that totally shut down the Suns' midfield grunt. Tagging halfbacks can also be effective, and that's something James Jordan has done at Sydney at times, and that can stifle opposition ball movement. However, with the kickouts and ability to run around the mark and receive handballs, this is difficult to do for the whole game. But it does seem like those in and under mids are the easiest to tag and most effective at halting the opposition's best players and their clearance game. But an underrated tactic is the cooler. It's a version of the tag, but deployed during games and when a player is hot and causing damage. Jordan did this against Will Day in opening round, who had 17 disposals and 3 goals till halftime, but finished the game with just 26 disposals. The Western Bulldogs in Ballarat sent Tom Liberatore to Zach Butters after the opening quarter, and Butters gathered just 2 clearances after quarter time. Sometimes this can be more effective than an opening bounce tag, as it causes the opposition to adjust on the run, and the player the cooler can go to is variable depending on who gets the hot hand. Geelong did this against the Western Bulldogs, initially sending O'Sheen Mullen to Ed Richards early on, but then shifted Mark Blitzavs to Bonampelli early in the third quarter, who had just 9 disposals in the second half. It is a surprise we don't see this a bit more often, as it can cause chaos in the heat of the battle and stop an opposition player when they are on fire. So to tag or not to tag? The data, at least from 2025, shows it is a 50-50 proposition in terms of winning the game. Sure, you can often stop the opposition's best player, but against the best teams, they can manipulate it a lot and gain an advantage. The team tagging also can lose a player on offense, and that has issues in itself. The tactic has been used less and less in this more transition style period of the game, and a majority of the good teams in the past few seasons haven't opted to use one from the opening bounce. The Windhager and Dacos matchup has been the most talked about tagging duel this season, and the next few rounds might tell all of us if the umpires crack down on it and try to help the attacking player for the rest of the year.